Can't hear you, Jesse.
Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. Of course, my mute button got the best of me. Thanks, David, for letting me know. I'm Jesse Lezak. I'm fractional CMO at BeatX, along with David Finkelstein, BeatX's founder and CEO. What's going on, David?
Hey, Jesse. Good to see you again. I don't know. I mean, I feel like every week I say it's been a busy week, but it's been a busy week.
Yeah, I feel you there. Anything you can fill us in on what you've been working on?
Yeah, I think that, something we're going to be launching very soon that, it's funny. We were just talking about how BeatX has always been very focused on consumer data, and we're about to launch product in the B2B space with a whole bunch of B2B data as well. And so it's going to be neat. It's going to be fun to launch that.
Yeah, really excited about that. So I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that. But until then, we have the pleasure of welcoming a really great guest onto today's show. We'll be talking a little bit about e-com in that space. But today we're thrilled to welcome, we've got Kyle. He's the CEO of OmniRocket. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Kyle. We're looking forward to this conversation. We had a great conversation before the show, so I'd like to dig in. But before we do, why don't you give our viewers and listeners a chance to get to know you a little bit? Tell us a little bit about your history and what led you to become the CEO of OmniRocket.
Yeah, so it's been a fantastic journey. So I kind of got started actually in the IT space, and when I did that for about 10 years, and then made this transition and pivoted over to digital marketing, and was in higher ed actually, and worked in that space for about 5 years as well. So did lead gen, email marketing, media buying, and for higher ed, so for college. And then during that time, I started doing a side hustle into the e-commerce space and launched a couple of Amazon brands, which I still own today. And then that led to more consulting on the e-commerce side, which then rolled in from Amazon. And in 2017 started with Shopify, more omni-channel. And that's where OmniRocket kind of grew out of. So started in the coaching and is helping people get started on Shopify, and then now rolled in more into like OmniRocket is today, which is a growth agency. So we offer a whole bunch of services ranging from fractional CMO and strategic planning and consulting, all the way down to executing from SEO to paid media on across all channels pretty much, and in email marketing and SMS marketing. So yeah, so data is near and dear to my heart. It's at the heartbeat of anything e-commerce related. And the better that you can sort of plan and optimize for it, the better the outcomes that you're going to get as a e-commerce business.
Absolutely. Well, with that, let's just hop right into it. So speaking of planning, as marketers, we like to segment our data. So let's talk about customer segmentation strategy and personalization that converts. Kyle, can you kick us off?
I'd love to. This is a great topic, and this is a topic that doesn't get as much love, particularly early on in your e-commerce journey, because when you're first starting out, you're just trying to basically like, hey, I need to make some money, I need to get product market fit and figure this out. But as you progress and you begin to continue to scale, customer segmentation becomes really, really important for you, because what you're quickly going to find is that not all customers buy for the same reason, and segmentation prevents sort of that one size fits all campaign mentality, which is fine at the beginning when you're getting started, but will fail you as you try to scale, because you're not going to be able to maximize the marketing budget and the activity that you're doing. Relevance drives revenue, right? So that's an important thing. There was a McKinsey report that said that personalization even can drive 10 to 15% revenue lift in e-commerce brands. And you can't do personalization until you start thinking about segmentation and the data that it's going to drive that. And then, when you're not segmenting correctly, you end up wasting your ad spend. You're spending dollars on your eyeballs and impressions that are not your buyer, not your intended buyer. And so you want to kind of obviously eliminate that as much as possible. So data is really your edge. When it comes down to brands that are winning in 2025, how you collect, organize, and act on customer data and doing that better than your competitors and more effective than your competitors is going to give you the edge you're looking for in that. So with that, customer segmentation, personalization, the challenge is that where does that data come from? How do you capture it, right? That's challenge number one. Customer data is often scattered across various channels. It could be on your website. It could be in your email platform, your CRM if you're using that. It could be in your social media platforms that you have. So it's usually incomplete and inconsistent. And so one of the difficulties is integrating all that together and then really having a plan in place to effectively segment and then use that data. So some good examples of like clear segmentation wins, right? Kendra Scott jewelry brand, they segmented first-time gifters and repeat self-buyers, right? And they saw a 22% increase in conversion rate on their gift campaigns because they started to segment that data out. Allbirds, which is a pretty relatively famous footwear brand, they built out a segment around eco-conscious buyers, right? And their email opt-ins that valued sustainability. And so they tried to clarify who their buyer was from an eco-conscious standpoint. And they saw a 40% increase in CTR, compared to generic emails. So their click-through rate by personalized storytelling around that segmentation of eco-conscious buyers, right? So that segmentation then leads to better performance. Again, so I'm just giving you some good examples of this. So Shorts, they based it on seasonal purchase behavior, right? Summer versus holiday, they saw a 28% repeat purchase rate lift from seasonal buyers that were targeted based on that data that they did within their segmentation. So yeah, there's a lot of cool ways in which you start to see the benefit of it. And then when you get into it as a e-commerce brand, then you start to really the light bulbs start to go off. You're like, ooh, this is an interesting segment, or the data is telling me that this is a really interesting cohort that I should be paying attention to. And you start connecting the dots, and that's when the magic really starts to happen.
I love it. I love that what you just said too about relevance drives revenue. That's such a good quote, because it's so important. And I've seen it as a consumer, right? You get emails, and if they're not, they're just a generic email about, the company and all their products, it doesn't really interest you, right? But as soon as you get one that's specific to something that's relevant to you, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, well, I got to click on this and check it out. And it works, right?
Yeah,
I think
for
that's
sure.
a big differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times it's not even a conscious thing.
Yeah.
You just do it subconsciously, and that's the goal, right? Is that they're speaking to you at a time when your data or your segment, your interest level in that is clearly defined. So, and that's interesting because you see this happen on Google. At least I do, right? I might Google something, a topic, and now I'm starting to see ads relevant for that topic start to pop up in all of this. I was like, yeah, because Google understands my intent, right? I use Chrome, so Chrome's taking that data. But do I care? No, because I want them to only serve me ads that are relevant to me. And a lot of people are like, oh, why are you tracking me with all this stuff? I was like, yeah, I want to be tracked with that stuff because I don't want to see ads that are not relevant to me. I want to see stuff that only matters to me when I want it, right? So that actually is a benefit to me, not a distraction or something that I'm trying to avoid. So, the question then often comes up is well, what are some easy ways to get started with segmentation, right? Because there's really advanced ways to do it. And there are very well built out, expensive ways to do it, but there's also some easy ways to do it. One of the easy ways that we like to implement with clients is start with sort of our different levels of segmentation, right? So there's zero party segmentation, right? That's declared data. That's someone who voluntarily gives you information. So think of it like a style fit quiz. If you were a fashion brand, right, on your site, people are actually declaring and answering questions on that, right? So an easy way to do that, there's a couple of apps you can use, like Octane AI or Zigpoll, and you can run style fit quiz or whatever style. It doesn't have to be style fit. It could be, if it's beauty brand, it could be like face, skin type, whatever's relevant to your niche, capture those preferences. If you're using a tool like Shopify, which we are Shopify partners, so that's what we specialize in. Shopify has meta fields, right? That you can pull that data in at the customer level and then push those out to Klaviyo, right? You can sync those up to your Klaviyo, which is email, SMS platform. And then you can start to segment those flows based on that Shopify metadata you're collecting out of your polls, out of your quizzes, things like that, right? So that's zero party. You start there. The next, you can start with first party segmentation. So that's behavioral data. That's stuff that you can see on your website. So that's easy with Shopify and Klaviyo integration. You can clearly see high average order value customers, right? Average orders over $150 or whatever price point you want in your business. And maybe they get early access to drops, or they get early access to your new product launch. So high AOV customers is a pretty clear segmentation that you would want to focus on. Others would be like cart abandoners. It's pretty common. If you're using any email marketing, you're probably going to start with your automation flows and segments with people who abandon cart. Also, you want to be careful though, because there is distinction between cart abandoners and checkout abandoners, right? Like you have to understand where that is. In fact, I had a conversation with a client a couple of weeks ago, and we were analyzing this, and I was like, all of your abandoned cart, in quotes, marketing is actually to abandon checkout. You're not actually addressing people in the cart level because your flows have been set up incorrectly. It was right, but it wasn't complete. And so understanding what triggers that data is part of that segmentation process. Repeat buyers, again, would also be another first party segmentation.
Yeah.
So give us an example of how you would treat an abandoned cart differently than abandoned checkout.
Yeah, so it really depends on, I would treat them similarly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what matters is when you're looking at your data, you'll see within the flow of your the purchase journey on a website where people are at, and then what the conversion rate looks like for that, right? So my goal, and like this is the goal I have for clients, my goal is that if you add to cart, I want to close that 50% of the time. That would be my goal. Now, average range is like 20 on the very low end, 30% is kind of where it averages out to most Shopify. But 50 is kind of like, starting to be in really, really good territory. So what I see happen though is by default, a lot of times the initial Shopify trigger is at checkout, like initiate checkout. And so they start that process, but you have to actually look at it. It's like, well, where is that breaking down in the process? So if they do cart and you're not actually triggering that is when your flow starts, you're just basically relying on them to remember to go back to their cart. And a lot of times people use cart for just a storage mechanism. Like I'm just gonna have this cart and I'll come back to it later. But if you're not prompting that reminder, right, early enough, then people will forget. And they just sit on it for a long period of time. So you see this time to purchase, which is another metric that we track, be extended out. And so one of the goals from an automation and marketing and data standpoint is like, how do we shrink the time to purchase window? And that's how you start to look at it. So you might use the same messaging. And in many cases, I tell clients this, I was like, don't start by offering like a discount. Like just start by reminding people, because I would say 80% of the time, it's just a matter that they still want to check out and buy from you, but the timing is not right. Maybe they added the cart on their phone or they're on their computer and their desktop and they added their cart, but they had to take their kid to school or whatever, or they got a business call. And so it just sits there, like it's open on their desktop, but immediately they're like, give you 20% off, 10% off. I was like, wait, hold up. Just like back it up. Like look at your data and look to what that looks like. And then just send a couple of reminders and wait for it to get a little bit further down your flows before you just try to incentivize it with some sort of discount. Because if not, you could be just giving away money for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah,
Definitely.
guilty as charged. I've totally put things in my cart and like totally ignored it to see if I'd get a follow-up email or something saying,
yeah, they give you a discount, right? Yeah, no, you've gamed the system, because that's what people like. That's the go-to move. And I'm just like, think that you should do that initially. I mean, you can
Yeah.
100%, but like think through like the mechanisms that you want to try and offer to make that happen and close that deal, and kind of, use that as the last resort, ideally.
Yeah, for sure.
So we got a couple comments. I'm going to go ahead and get into them a little bit here. So the first one was asking like how AI plays into all of this. The next two are from, and that's from AP. AP, thanks for being back here at Deconstructing Data. Always love your questions. Keep them coming. And then we have Chris Daly, who's been on the show twice, actually. He says, and he's the one, remind me, Chris, what's the name of your product? It's I Want That. So basically giving the consumers the ability to say, hey, I'll buy this to basically negotiate the price while it's in the cart,
Nice.
if I remember correctly, Chris.
Hey,
He says, if I'm a registered user on Shopify as a customer and I add product to cart and then jump off the site, is that cart captured by Klaviyo and my email address for remarketing? And if I'm not on the database for the shop, does that cart go to retargeting using meta ads, etc.?
It's a great question. The answer is, well, I would say if it's set up correctly, yes, it would capture you in Klaviyo as a cart abandoned, right? It'll also capture you when you initiate a checkout. So think about your shopping experience. When you add a product to a cart, that's a trigger, right? So that's actually a trigger. Then when you click checkout, that's another trigger. When you add in your payment information, that's another layer of the process. And then you actually complete the purchase. So across all of those layers, you can in fact be set up for segmentation in Klaviyo. You can also have it segmented within Meta, for example, as an ad platform. And they'll also be able to build custom audiences off of that data directly through the API integration that Shopify has with Meta as a platform. So you kind of get it from both locations. And yes, you would be able to retarget people as long as you have enough traffic through it to make it a big enough retargeting audience in Meta. But yeah, in general, you would for sure, and you should, right? That would be an e-commerce best practice, or even just a shopping cart. Even if you don't do e-commerce and you sell B2B stuff, like, yeah, if someone starts and adds your product to the cart and you want to sell something or adds a service, right? Like, yeah, you want to talk to that person because they're going to be a really hot lead. So you really want to flag that at some level, and whether that's a sales follow-up or whatever your process looks like, it should be highlighted in that way. But yeah, I mean, Shopify and Klaviyo have a very tight integration, and then Shopify and Meta and even Google. Typically, you're going to set that stuff up in Google Analytics and then push that data to Google Ad Platform to track that stuff.
Good stuff. Well, thank you for sharing. We better get on to the second topic before we run out of time here.
Yeah.
So second topic, transitioning thoughts here, but keep the questions coming from the comments. We love those. Demand forecasting and inventory, data-driven optimization. Kyle, can you kick us off?
Yeah. So this is another one where you can. This is what I would call like a capital drain on an e-commerce business, especially if you're selling a physical product, right? So the challenge is that you need to accurately predict demand for your products, right? So you have enough inventory. And what happens is if you don't plan correctly, you end up with stock outs, right? So you will lose sales because you don't have the inventory. Or if you overstock, then now you increase your holding costs, and your capital's tied up in inventory that's sitting in a warehouse. Both of them are not ideal. And so the challenge is that demand is influenced by so many factors, right? Seasonality, trends, external events, weather, holidays, competitors, actions. So predicting it requires some process, typically some machine learning models and some real-time data integration to really nail it. So that's why it really does, it matters, right? So because stockouts are a big component of that, of like lost revenue. Stockouts can also lead to unhappy customers. Both are bad. Back orders, order cancellations, refunds, all that's not great. The reality is that demand is dynamic. And so understanding that is really, really important. And so what that does is the smart forecasting and this data, demand forecasting, and inventory optimization, essentially what that does is it helps you free up your cash flow. Like if you think about it from like, why does this really matter to me? Because cash flow matters, right? There's this famous quote that I love. I think it was like I can't remember. It was like this. I think it was like the CEO of like Volvo or something like this back in the 80s said, revenue, top line revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king, or cash is reality, right? Like that was basically like the idea about it. And like cash flow is your reality, right? And profit is your sanity. Top line revenue numbers don't really matter. I mean, they matter, but they're not the most important thing. And so freeing up cash flow, because physical product e-commerce businesses, as you scale, it's a very cash intensive business, right? So better working capital, leaner ops, and higher profitability will be driven by a large portion by smart forecasting and smart data inventory management. And so, and it's not just like a simple math part, it's how your sales impact it, how's your marketing. All of those are data-driven inputs to how that process works. And, it's like, for example, some real-world examples of this, Nike invested a lot of money into demand forecasting, like AI tools, but they cut their supply chain lead times by 30%, right? H&M, they applied machine learning stuff to predict local store demand, right? So weather, season, social trends, all that kind of stuff. And they reduced their overstock by 21%, by implementing some of this stuff. So like for example, Shopify brand, they'd have chronic stockouts on their top 10% SKUs. So when they start fixing that data issue, their reorder cadence jumped by 18% with no additional ad spend increase. Being in stock led them to more revenue being generated, which makes sense, right? Because people are ordering more because they're like, oh, there's availability of this product. The other way you can do this is looking at it from a historical standpoint, right? There are brands that I often work with. We'll go back and look at prior sales history, like Black Friday, holiday buying seasonality. Like, well, what was really driving sales back then historically? And now that you know that, you can look at your Klaviyo, you can look at your Shopify data, and you're like, this is a product that we should be prepared for. I'm going to order 20%, maybe more of it to be prepared, and I won't be sold out right within that time frame. I'll have enough inventory. Yeah. So that's important stuff when you start thinking about how that works. It can be a huge cost.
Are there any good tools within Shopify to assist with that?
Yeah, there are. I mean, it's some manual stuff if you're going to go straight with Shopify, right? So if you were going to do just like baseline forecasting within Shopify, you would probably like export the last 12 to 24 months of sales by SKU into a Google sheet. That way you can break down average monthly sales season. You can look at seasonality spikes. You could push that data into like AI tool. They'd be pretty good at sort of figuring out some of that stuff, but you'll easily identify your top 20 SKUs. Shopify does have some SKU recognition stuff built directly into it that can and will help you with that. So there are reporting tools and kind of AI tools that will help you. And they've added a lot more in the last, I would say, 24 months to the platform for that. And then there's also where it starts to get challenging is if you are an omni-channel seller, meaning you sell on Shopify, but maybe you sell on Amazon and Walmart and maybe a host of other places as well. So at that point, what you really need to be thinking about is probably some sort of inventory forecasting tool. There's one I can think of. I think it's Cogsy. .com. So they do a lot of demand planning, and it's multi-input. You can do from different platforms pulling into it, different shipping, even like ShipBob and 3PLs, and then ShipStation and all the other things you'd be using for that. And so they can do a good job with that. Stocky is another one, but that's more like POS, but it can be a good one for a tool as well. And then the other things, though, that's good for looking at historical data. But then you start thinking about how do external factors that may be forward looking. How does weather impact some of that stuff. And you can see it, but you
Mm.
have to kind of make that connection to your supply chain. Seasonality is a huge one. Some brands and products have massive seasonality spikes to it.
Sure.
So just understanding that component is important. And then marketing campaigns too. Like you want to align your ad spend plans with forecasting. So Cogs is pretty good with that because it can integrate in with some other channels for media and sort of your marketing costs. But that's the other piece. If you're going to do a big marketing push, you need to be able to make sure that you're have enough inventory to support it, right? Like, oh, I want to do all this, but if you're not buying enough inventory, have enough inventory, it doesn't really make sense to push that forward. So that's an important piece of it. So
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, waste of marketing spend.
Yeah, which happens all the time. You know,
Right.
unfortunately, you know, you kind of get it becomes it's a really the issue really stands out, particularly on like as an Amazon seller. So if you're selling on Amazon as a platform, stockouts crush your momentum because you might spend a lot of time and energy like getting a lot of good organic ranking on Amazon as a platform where your product is showing up organically high in the search terms that you want. But as soon as your inventory really dips below a certain level, the algorithm starts to deprioritize your product because it knows you're running out of stock, right? And you'll kind of see that, and you'll get down to the very end, and your rankings will drop and drop and drop and drop and drop. So that will actually happen. And then when you completely stock out, your rankings continue to just kind of tail off because you don't have any inventory. So Amazon's not going to show your product to customers if they can't sell the product, right?
Yeah.
So that has a huge impact. And then if you do that consistently, then you have to go back and try to rebuild that sales velocity on the platform. So it can have a real impact primarily on that platform where you don't want to have stockouts be an issue. You know, like some quick wins for this that I've seen, just get like, hey, let's apply this immediately. It's like, what's your top 10 SKUs? Do you know your order inventory production time? Like, what's your timeline to be able to get that back in stock? And then just set your reorder points ahead of time on your top 10, looking at your seasonality data, looking at that projection. You can try an inventory planning tool, right, to automate some of that stuff as like a trial and check it out. Make sure you're aligning Black Friday, Q4, holiday ad spend and inventory needs ahead of time. Plan ahead for that stuff. I'll look at historical trend, look at what you're trending at for the current year and what you plan to do if you really want to push your marketing for that time. Make sure you plan ahead. And then just in general, you can sort of set, if outside of like going and getting tools that are going to run this for you, which, Cogsy is one I mentioned, or Stockly, you can set sort of safety stock levels, right? So if you get 10, 15%, I would say like plan safety stock levels, like reserve, plan 10 to 15%, buy a little bit extra. Now, again, you want to be cautious about over inventorying and having too much so you don't go on capital. But if you're growing relatively consistently, having a 10 to 15% cushion would be better than not having any inventory. Like if I had to pick, if someone's like, you have to choose, are you going to be stocked out or are you going to be over inventoried? I would take over inventoried over being stocked out, right? Because now I have at least have some ability in my my toolbox, right, to say, oh, if I'm overstocked by a lot, I can run a promotion, right? I can run a discount. I can sell through that, recoup my cost with it. If I'm stocked out, I'm not selling. I'm not making any revenue, right? So I think that's the biggest thing, is just making sure that you're forecasting properly, because the difference is, leaving money on the table and maximizing every dollar in your inventory. And that's where just putting some thought into that can unlock another 10, 20% more of revenue without any additional spend. Like you're just going to get 10 to 20% more profitable by thinking about how to manage your inventory appropriately.
Good advice.
Yeah, I mean, forecasting is something I really don't know a lot about, but that seems really daunting.
It can be. Well, it becomes a data issue for sure, that if you're not organizing,
I mean, forecasting with products like that in terms of like, how many of these will I need to buy, and like having these on stock.
Yeah, and the more,
and then I just realized
more product you have, more SKUs you have, then the more difficult that's more complex.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
So interesting.
And then it gets a lot. Add complexity to it. It's not just the expansion of your catalog with SKU count. it's also the expansion of the sales channels that you are selling through as well. So as you have like your own Shopify store, and you have Amazon and Walmart and wherever, Target, or maybe you even wholesale into big box retail, and they'd be like, I want 100,000 units, for Q4. Well, now you're planning from multiple sales channels with multiple SKU count. At that point, you're definitely going to want to invest in some level of software that's going to help you automate that process and do big data crunching for you. That's not something you're going to want to do in a spreadsheet.
I like selling data. I don't have to worry about the inventory.
No, yeah,
Yes,
exactly. 100%. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have one more topic we need to make sure we get to.
Yeah, let's
Yep.
get into it. Customer lifetime value, predictive analytics for profitability.
Yeah, so
Kyle,
this
can you
is
pick us up?
one of my favorites, I think, because this is really where the profit and money is made. And this is true of, I think, almost every business, but I think it's definitely true of e-commerce as well. So lifetime value, how much is a customer worth? The challenge kind of comes into it where if you're trying to predict long-term value, it's based on your initial customer acquisition costs and bringing them into your business as a customer. But what are the purchase patterns that drive that? And I think it's really, really important to understand those numbers, right? And because this is key to retention and really drives your marketing decision making. Because, like an example of this is there's sort of this axiom in digital marketing that says the person who can spend the most to acquire a customer wins. And if you think about it, that means like if my competitor and I are going head to head and I can only spend $20 to acquire a customer because I don't have a strategy to maximize that customer value, or I don't have a catalog big enough, or, I can only sell them one product and I can only spend $20. And my competitor, who maybe has a bigger catalog, has a very built out and thought through back end to their business, can spend $100 to acquire a customer because they know what the lifetime value is. They can outspend me, and eventually they're going to dominate that market share because they can spend more to acquire the customer, where I'm limited in what I can do. And so understanding customer lifetime value is really critical for that. The challenge is that customer lifetime value prediction models typically rely on historical data, but customer data is constantly changing, right? So how do you predict future behavior based on past actions? That can be really hard. And the impact of that is that bad customer lifetime value calculations will lead to poor marketing and investments. You won't invest properly, right? You're going to be in that low end customer acquisition cost where you're like, my goal is to limit and get the lowest customer acquisition cost that I can. And I understand why you're driving to that goal. The challenge is that it's the wrong goal, because if I take it as like, no, I want to figure out how I can spend more to acquire a customer, because that's going to give me the ability to just dominate that. Because advertising as a whole, for the most part, right, is in a bidding system. Ads, meta ads, Google ads, you're bidding, right, to who for those eyeballs and those impressions. And so if I'm willing to spend way more than you, I'm going to get those clicks, I'm going to get those eyeballs, and I'm going to keep you kind of contained from that standpoint. So optimizing for the lowest customer acquisition cost is not necessarily the smartest long-term investment in your business, but you could only unlock that if you have good customer lifetime value data and a plan, right? Thinking about it, because a couple of things to keep in mind with that is not all customers are equal. As much as we would like to think all of our customers are amazing and awesome, there are customers that are worth 10 times more over a period of time than another customer. And so are you optimizing to try to attract those 10x customers in your business? Because if you're not, you're leaving money on the table and you are wasting your ad spend dollars. And the other thing to think about is, and I kind of alluded to this already, but customer acquisition cost is blind without lifetime value. You're kind of running with one hand tied behind your back because of that, what I mentioned in terms of spend, right?
You got to look at the CAC LTV ratio, right?
Yeah, that's the classic, right? It's like, what does that look like in terms of but that's only half the equation. If you don't have good lifetime value data,
it's not even worth it. Yeah,
you're just guessing at that point, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh
so,
man, I could talk this
yeah,
all day.
this is why this is one of my favorite topics to dive into, because this really impacts profitability for the long haul.
Yeah, I do like looking at CAC. So when you first started talking, you were saying you should have the highest CAC. I was like, where is he going with this? But yeah, I do agree that balancing out the lifetime value makes a ton of sense,
Right. Yeah.
especially like depending on the timeline you're looking at. But we could go on and on about CAC, LTV ratio. I'd be curious of other like KPIs that you like to look at. But one thing we do ask, and we only have 8 minutes left on the show, so I'm going to get right into it. We ask all the guests who come on Deconstructing Data, what are some
Yep.
of your favorite tools in your tech stack that empower you and your team?
That's a great one. Let's break this down. Well, let's hang out with customer lifetime value real quick. One tool that I like if you are running a Shopify store, I like the tool Lifetimely. They do a really good job with sort of customer lifetime value prediction. Now, within Shopify, they've added a lot of cool stuff around cohorts and what that looks like. Lifetimely does a good job of pulling some of that data together a little bit more efficiently, I think. And so I find it to be worth it. They have dedicated CLV and they have predictive analytics as well. And they also go into like deeper drivers of that CLV, which I think is really important. So Lifetime is a great app for that. I usually recommend that to clients. You can also see like Triple Whale's another one. They're more CLV by channel and campaign attribution. Those would be the tech stack that you would be great with just those, like just Lifetimely as a Shopify store owner. If you wanted like a deeper analysis, great tech stack. Simple, you're done. I think in terms of inventory management, Shopify does have some really good baseline tools that you could use in pulling that data. But that cogsy.com would be one if you really kind of need to go to the next level or you need to have multiple inputs into your inventory systems. That would be one. I think Stocky is another one, but Cogsy for sure would be the tech stack. I mean, my philosophy is the smallest tech stack possible should be my outcome and goal, right? And as simple as possible. One is because it increases complexity and it also increases cost. And the net benefit of having a complex tech stack is marginal improvement, right, over the simplest form. So I think that you just have to like, there's apps that really work well in the e-commerce space. The tech stack for segmentation is a little bit more varied, I think, because it depends on the level of segmentation and action for like data enrichment that you want to do. Like if you just want to do segmentation, Klaviyo and Shopify will get you to tier 1 status, right? If you want to go up a level, now you want to think about zero party, means declared data, like somebody's on your site giving you data, then you need some sort of like customer interaction tool. So like Octane.ai is like a question, like a polling quiz type of tool that you can use that will pull that data into it. Zigpoll I mentioned. Also Inquiry Labs is another tool that you can do like post-purchase surveys with on Shopify, which is also a valuable piece. It's like, yeah, top of funnel leads is great and getting segmentation, but even after somebody purchases is probably one of the more important data segmentation points for you, because now you can ask them about, why did you buy from me? Did you look at any other places before you made your purchasing decision? Like you can, and the cool thing about that is you start to gather the language that your customers use, and then you can use that language back in your marketing. But you can only do that if you're asking them these questions. And so post-purchase polling and quizzing and kind of questionnaires and surveys is a underutilized tool set in, I think, all marketing, but definitely in e-com. And if you're doing it properly, it's going to give you really good data. So Inquiry Labs does that real great. Shopify obviously has tools for a lot of the first party segmentation. Klaviyo is like awesome for all that stuff. And then, you know, you can get into like Meta and its Pixel, and you can do segmentation at the platform level as well for pixel data. across the board. So pixeling, with Meta or with, TikTok or with, Google ads is just making sure that data is being shared properly, right? Like making sure
Right.
it's set up correctly would be great. And then the final layer, if you want to have the ultimate sort of data enrichment layer, is using other firms that will then go out and get you, you might have a customer that signs up and maybe buys from you. So you have their name, their email, their address, but you're like, what are the other aspects of this person that I can kind of enrich that data through other third parties? So that's third party data enrichment.
Oh, definitely.
And there's definitely some tools. Although, to be honest, and we were talking about this before the show, I feel like there's opportunity in that space on the B2C side for consumer. Like there are big ones out there, right? Like Zoom Info, and like there's huge data, like it's more B2B, but there's big data repositories. But most of them I feel like are either super high priced or they don't really focus on the consumer side as effectively and efficiently. So there's some probably room in the market to be super clear on that enrichment piece. But that would be the final leg of your sort of data enrichment segmentation journey, is just going down from like zero party all the way to third party, right? It's like zero party, first party, second party, and then like third party data. And you can have a tech stack for all of it. But like the easiest is like get started somewhere and just add to it as you grow.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that, Kyle.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was really helpful. I learned a lot. I love the fact that what you shared about the sort of the missing link is really having a lot of good enrichment data for the consumer, because we have that and we have an API for that. And so I think that one of the things we need to work on is penetrating the e-commerce space more, so they understand that they can get that data from us. So we're definitely going to make a move on that and
like literally upload the list to OmniIQ. It's still free, right? To just upload the list, right, David? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, if you go to, I'm going to tell you here in a second, actually. But before I do, put this QR code on the screen. Kyle, could you let the listeners know how they could reach you after the show if they'd want to reach out?
Absolutely. The best way to reach out to me, you can hit me up at kyle@omnirocket.com or go hit me up on LinkedIn. And definitely check out Beyond the Cart, which is our live stream show podcast that we run. And I'd love to see you on the show. We're going to talk everything e-commerce related. We're talking about the e-commerce ecosystem as a whole, from a position as an agency, as a provider of services in that space. And it would be great to connect. And any of those channels would be awesome.
Yeah, and which will be cool because I'm going to be on that show on September 2nd.
That's right.
So we'll dig more into the data side of the business.
Unshameless plug.
Exactly. Well, Kyle, this has been awesome. I appreciate you joining us on the show today. I'm looking forward to going on your show in a couple of weeks, and we'll let Jesse kick it off, end it off for us.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And that I will wrap us up before we close with our outro video. But audience members, before we go, we just want to invite you to get powered by BeatX. I put a QR code on the screen. So if you're watching here on video, you can just scan that QR code. Otherwise, if you're on podcast and listening, just head on over to beatx.com and you can click on Talk to an Expert to get powered by BeatX. So BeatX has an industry-leading identity graph, and its trusted foundation is powering some of the top ed tech and MarTech platforms across the ecosystem. So our comprehensive identity resolution drives results across every channel. So this is from precision and ad targeting, a lot of website visitor retargeting, to direct mail campaigns, lead generation, and turning anonymous website visitors into actionable customer intelligence. So we're working with some major brands. Just head over to beatx.com and you'll see some of the biggest logos on there. And whether you're looking to enhance your targeting, your accuracy, recovering abandoned carts, scale lead generation efforts, or just maximize performance across digital and online channels, BeatX levers the most accurate identity resolution in the industry. So we have eliminated bots, bad data, and all the waste your marketing budget is wasting on, while actually providing you with the real verified audiences that are driving the measurable ROI. So just join the leading platforms that trust BDEX to power their success, and go to bdex.com, click on Talk to an Expert, and get powered by BDEX. But thanks again, Kyle, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Absolutely. Bye.